Most chiropractors aspire to practice in a way that is evidence-based, but struggle with what this looks and feels like in their world. As you are aware, there are three important pillars comprising the evidence-based practice paradigm. Striving to combine one's clinical expertise and experience with the best available scientific evidence and the preferences of the patient to deliver rational, effective, safe, individualized patient care is, in its totality, easier said than done. In this perfect form, it likely happens less than we would prefer. Today, I will focus on the best available scientific evidence portion of this paradigm, as that's my wheelhouse. More specifically, I care about three things. Number one, fostering the generation of relevant, meaningful, and clinically applicable research. Number two, making this research understandable and easily applicable for clinicians in day-to-day chiropractic practice. And three, improving the cultural authority of the chiropractic profession in the context of a more efficient, effective, evidence-based, interprofessional, collaborative, global healthcare system. To those at the WFC and other associations around the world, this should sound familiar. To be clear, all three pillars of the evidence-based practice model are important, and discussing how they should interact with each other specifically is perhaps a talk for another time. But I will posit that staying current on and integrating best evidence is the most difficult aspect for clinicians to tackle effectively and efficiently. The literal or digital piles of research papers being published every week in the peer-reviewed literature, in combination with the constant, deceptively algorithmic social media barrage of mostly misinformation most subject themselves to, keeping up in a meaningful way has become nearly impossible. This wasn't the case in our profession when I started publishing research reviews for RRS Education in 2006. At that time, I was actually worried we wouldn't have enough new research material to cover, as I launched a weekly, subscription-based service. 15 years and 1,000 research reviews later, I'm here today to speak to you about knowledge transfer in our great profession. The synthesis of evidence from clinical and basic sciences research into daily practice is perhaps the biggest challenge that healthcare professionals face, regardless of discipline. The need for continuing professional development, of which knowledge transfer is a key component, is now well recognized in chiropractic globally. But the consistent and equally important demands of treating patients, running a practice, and managing personal and family life in general render it rather difficult to find time to stay current with the scientific literature for most. Many clinicians, in my experience, feel rather helpless and even fundamentally lost or ill-equipped in this regard. A common sentiment is that the flow of new information is so great that one may not know where or how to start. In many ways, it is akin to trying to sip water from an open fire hydrant. Trust me, I know it can feel that way. I have dedicated much of my chiropractic career to this problem, information overload, or its exact and perhaps more concerning converse for field DCs, what I refer to as underload. I'm talking about knowledge transfer, that is, how individuals deal with the constant flow of emerging scientific literature. This is something I got into before it was cool. For some practitioners, ongoing knowledge integration is totally new, and when they started practicing, chiropractic research and healthcare research for that matter wasn't really a thing yet. As I've also discovered throughout my career, chiropractors have a love-hate relationship with science. We love it when it confirms or supports our opinions, biases, or observations, but when it doesn't, we like to simply ignore it or call it flawed. I call this fair-weather research consumption, and I don't think it's productive. So what is knowledge transfer? When I started creating and curating research reviews written by chiropractors for chiropractors, the concept of knowledge transfer was, on the heels of the evidence-based medicine model's rise to the forefront roughly a decade prior, starting to receive more attention in the published literature. Now you can pursue a graduate degree in this area. Knowledge transfer is also referred to as knowledge translation, management, exchange, dissemination and diffusion, and also implementation science or research utilization, among others. Those papers get a little less interesting for practicing clinicians, so I'll move on. Knowledge translation in healthcare is both an art and a science. While brilliant researchers design and execute outstanding studies with highly meaningful outcomes, changing practice to accommodate best evidence is fraught with difficulty. Despite this, persistence and perseverance are critical. For the chiropractic profession to advance, we must recognize that a solid commitment to evidence-based practice will be the currency that secures our cultural authority and global acceptance. We now have data demonstrating that there are gaps between evidence and clinical behavior in every healthcare profession, including our own. This results in suboptimal outcomes for patients, ballooning healthcare expenditures, and frustration among clinicians amid criticism for all of it. So how is this supposed to work? Some have proposed two basic principles for knowledge transfer, building blocks, if you will. The first is integration, which basically means taking a large amount of information and turning it into a smaller amount of information. Second is simplification, which means reformatting complicated information to something simpler for clinicians to utilize and digest. Another way to think of it is the flow from knowledge creation, meaning the studies and the science itself, to knowledge distillation, meaning putting the studies together in a meaningful way, such as systematic reviews, meta-analyses, or clinical practice guidelines, to knowledge dissemination, which could be in the form of structured courses, in-person conferences, day-to-day practice, or personal habits of the clinician. There are other theoretical models and flow diagrams for this knowledge transfer concept, and that's great, but what is most critical for our patients, and quite frankly the long-term success and acceptance of our profession, is whether this process, number one, occurs, and number two, results in actual advances in clinician behavior, patient outcomes, and broader policy. The evidence currently suggests that integration of new research findings into clinical practice patterns can take years, and this is something we need to work on as well as many other healthcare disciplines. Ultimately, one of the practical outcomes of efficient knowledge transfer is the rational implementation of new evidence in conjunction with the de-implementation of older, ineffective, or unnecessary practices. This hasn't always been easy for us in our profession, has it? Sometimes intellectual progress requires both learning and unlearning. This is our new reality and responsibility, and behaving in this manner will show the world we are serious about our progress and the health of humanity. In my opinion and the opinions of our leading researchers, this is our only way forward. As I mentioned a moment ago, most chiropractors in the field are wearing many important hats and striving for some sort of life balance. As I also mentioned, staying current in a meaningful way is difficult. There are many challenges and hurdles to overcome. Let's start with the big one, the pure volume of papers. It has become overwhelming in most disciplines, with recent estimates in medical specialties proposing that clinicians would need to read more than 20 papers per day to keep up in their field. Can you imagine? Accessibility of papers is another significant issue. When was the last time you, a practicing chiropractor, paid $40 or more, or 40 euros or more, for 48-hour access to one paper? That paper was probably paid for in part by your tax dollars, just for the record. The rise of open access research publishing certainly feels like a step in the right direction, but this model comes with its own set of problems. In some cases, researchers can simply pay to have their research published. This has led to predatory publishing practices which has strained an already struggling peer review system. Again, perhaps a topic for another time. Then there is the complexity of science itself. Many studies feature complicated designs, employ high-powered and evolving and sometimes downright confusing statistical methods, contain technical jargon, and use assessment technologies inaccessible to regular clinicians. The result is that those in practice don't even know where to start, even with relatively simple studies. Many of our colleagues practice alone, as a sole chiropractor in a clinic, or even as the only doctor in a rural or remote area. This can reduce the opportunity for both organic opportunities for knowledge transfer, including discussions with associates and colleagues in real time about common patients, for example, to the more structured opportunities of attending in-person conferences and seminars. The world has been forced to go virtual in recent months with COVID-19, but I think there is still value in in-person learning, and we must be mindful of this for those in more remote regions who may not have consistent access to these events. Personally, I think a hybrid method of in-person with virtual is a good idea. Other issues include guru culture, something near and dear to chiropractic, both past and present. Algorithmic social media distortion and overload, personal confirmation bias, and the unbreachable momentum of familiarity and routine. This list could certainly go on, but you get the point. I don't think we have any data on this, but I suspect the vast majority of chiropractors might read a few abstracts here and there, or hopefully utilize or consume a format like our research reviews from RRS Education, clinical guidelines, or other tools. But what mechanism is sufficient to stimulate consistent growth and adaptation? Clinicians, quite simply, need some help with this. So what are some strategies? What do we do? The subtitle of this talk is Power, Advancement, and Currency. Let's explore these a little more. The chiropractic profession must now navigate the challenge of not only educating our students to foster both clinical acumen and business savvy, but also supporting and maintaining the skills, knowledge, and involvement of our practicing doctors. Knowledge transfer is a critical component of this. It is commonly stated that knowledge is power, and this is true in many aspects of life and certainly applies to all disciplines in healthcare. However, I don't think it's that easy. I feel some action must be put into this equation as well. During your chiropractic education, you are hopefully provided with an accurate contemporary snapshot of what our current state of knowledge was at that time. Since then, whether you knew it or not, the challenge of staying current has been up to you. Surprise! Integrating contemporary evidence will enhance our ability to forge our own path as a valued profession, achieve appropriate status and recognition among our healthcare colleagues, and continue to earn the trust and respect of our patients. Certainly a win-win-win. For this to occur, we must collectively acknowledge that science and its appropriate integration and implementation is our primary path forward, which means we must accept a few things. First, science unfortunately doesn't care about our feelings nor our attachment to our professional history. We have to keep our minds open and remain adaptable. Second, evidence can confirm our beliefs, but not the reverse. And third, beliefs, no matter how strongly held, or their vintage or their originator, are not more important than facts. That last one really tends to confuse some in our profession, unfortunately. The good news is our research capacity has never been stronger globally and will only grow from now on. Our prior investments around the world in research grassroots are finally starting to bear fruit, and the future is certainly bright. There is power in controlling our own destiny from a research perspective, but I would posit that our ability to create important science is now outpacing our ability to integrate the findings into daily practice. This is something I'm working on. Our profession seems to be at a perpetual crossroads, a struggle among the concepts of advancement, integration, unity, and identity. Skillful and consistent knowledge transfer may not be a panacea for all our complex problems, but it does offer some significant opportunities for advancement for our profession. Let's face it, the majority of our wins in recent years have been thanks to the efforts of our researchers. From clarifying the relationship between neck manipulation and stroke, to establishing our high-quality levels of evidence to warrant our inclusion in virtually all major clinical guidelines for spinal pain. A short number of years ago, this was not the case. Our sciencing, for lack of a better term, has certainly provided value and will continue to do so. But I also feel there is a distinct opportunity to advance the connection between our researchers and practicing clinicians, the very consumers this research is, in theory, created for in most cases. Researchers must push the scientific envelope while remaining cognizant of the realities of day-to-day practice and patient care, something they themselves were or still are involved with in many cases. At the same time, clinicians must commit to staying current. Knowledge transfer is a team effort and requires input from our entire profession, from researchers to field docs to administrators and associations and people like me. Currency, for my purpose today, has two important meanings. First, using the most common monetary definition, we know that science is the global currency in healthcare and something we must continue to embrace. Contemporary healthcare increasingly evolves on data, and these days it's big data, relating to patient outcomes and satisfaction, related cost, and efficiency. The only way to ensure the value of chiropractic moving forward is to lean into this approach and demonstrate our value. As I've said, our current research output is admirable and should be a point of pride for us, but unless published findings are disseminated and integrated into the trenches on Monday morning, what's the point? The second definition of currency relevant here is the fact or quality of being generally accepted or in use. I won't linger here, but this seems like something we should strive for, right? The ultimate goal of knowledge transfer is to upskill our practicing DCs to better serve our patients. Education institutions and professional organizations within our profession can also play an important role in the ongoing promotion of knowledge transfer. Chiropractic education should foster both a love and sense of duty for staying current on emerging scientific evidence and equip graduates with a confident sense of the fluidity of knowledge within our profession and healthcare in general. Lifelong learning is paramount and can be at least partly facilitated by professional associations, which can provide dissemination resources and tools for their members. If you need help with this, contact me. I can help. In conclusion, it is my belief that data-driven and reality-based knowledge transfer are simultaneously possible and can coexist in our profession, something we should boldly and collectively pursue and invest in, from individual practitioners to local, national, and global associations. Clinicians desire certainty, and science can rarely provide that, but research can and should continuously inform our thought processes, clinical conduct, and how we interact with our patients. Science, both chiropractic and that which we collaboratively create and consume in the broader healthcare universe, will allow us to counter the temptation to dwell in our history books, which is tantamount to choosing the heart over the head, the limbic system over the cortex, and blinking over thinking. This work is difficult, make no mistake, and knowledge transfer can rarely be a purely passive endeavor. Clinicians must accept responsibility for their continued learning, just as researchers must be responsible for generating research that matters. Ultimately, our talk must match our walk from a knowledge transfer perspective. If we don't navigate this successfully, we risk becoming healthcare's mullet. Serious up front, but no one's quite sure what's going on in the back. Thank you for listening, and I can't wait to see you in person when the world returns to normal. In the meantime, if I can be of assistance or you're interested in our research reviews, online learning options, or other knowledge transfer tools, please contact me at shawn@rrseducation.com. Thank you, WFC, for the invitation to speak at this event, and thank you to Parker University for the technical assistance. I wish you all to be well and look forward to seeing you soon. Take care and bye for now.